Look at you down there. Pathetic.
The maid they mocked was secretly the owner's daughter. You? Clean this floor again? Maybe if you scrubbed harder, you'd finally learn your place in this house. Adeyemi's laughter rang through the marble hallway as she stepped over the wet mop bucket, her heels clicking against the floor the young maid had just polished. What none of them knew was that within the week, the woman they humiliated daily would be sitting at the head of that very table, and every single person laughing right now would be begging for her mercy. Before we continue, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more stories like this one to you. Now, let's begin. Ngozi had worked in the Adeyemi household for almost a year. She was 24, quiet, and carried herself with a kind of stillness that made people either respect her or underestimate her completely. The Adeyemis, unfortunately, chose the latter. To them, she was simply the new girl, the one who mopped the floors, ironed the curtains, and disappeared into the kitchen whenever guests arrived. Mrs. Adeyemi, the matriarch of the house, ran her household the way she ran her business empire, with precision, discipline, and very little warmth. Her daughter, Adeyemi, had inherited her mother's sharp tongue, but none of her patience. And her son, Junior, mostly stayed out of the household drama, preferring the comfort of his room and his phone to anything happening downstairs. From the very first week, Ngozi understood her position in that house. She was not to speak unless spoken to. She was not to sit at the family table. She was not to look anyone directly in the eye for too long. These were never written rules, but they didn't need to be. Adeyemi made sure of that. Ngozi, iron this dress properly this time. Adeyemi would snap, tossing expensive fabric onto the floor rather than handing it over. Last time you left a crease near the collar. Do you even know how much this dress cost? Probably more than your entire family makes in a year. Ngozi would simply nod, pick up the dress, and get to work. She never argued. She never raised her voice. Some of the other staff members whispered that she was too soft, that she let the family walk all over her. But Ngozi had her reasons for staying silent, reasons none of them could have imagined. What the Adeyemis didn't know was that Ngozi hadn't always lived this way. She had grown up comfortably, the only daughter of a respected businessman who had built his wealth from nothing. Her father, Chief Okonkwo, had taught her two things above everything else: humility and the importance of understanding people from the ground up before ever leading them. If you want to run something one day, he used to tell her, sitting across from her on quiet evenings, you must first understand what it feels like to serve. Only then will you know how to treat the people who serve you. It was a lesson Ngozi had taken seriously, more seriously than her father ever expected. When he decided to test the character of the family his business was about to merge with, Ngozi volunteered without hesitation. She would go undercover, working as a maid in the Adeyemi household for 6 months, observing quietly, reporting back only the truth. Her father needed to know something important before signing a deal worth hundreds of millions. Was Mrs. Adeyemi truly the person she presented herself to be in boardrooms? Or was there a darker side hidden behind expensive suits and polished smiles? The kind of merger they were discussing wasn't just about money. It was about trust. And trust, Chief Okonkwo always said, could only be tested where no one was watching. So Ngozi packed a single suitcase, changed her name slightly for safety, and walked into the Adeyemi mansion as nothing more than a hired hand. No one questioned her. No one suspected a thing. Why would they? To them, she was simply another desperate young woman looking for work. The first few weeks were difficult, but manageable. Ngozi adjusted to waking up before sunrise, preparing breakfast, cleaning 3 floors of a house that felt more like a museum than a home. She learned to keep her opinions to herself, to lower her eyes when Adeyemi walked past, to absorb insults without flinching. But as the months went on, things grew harder. Adeyemi seemed to take a particular pleasure in finding new ways to belittle her. It started small, sharp comments about her clothes, her accent, the way she carried herself. But slowly, it escalated into something crueler. Why do you even bother trying to look presentable? Adeyemi once sneered, watching Ngozi straighten her uniform before serving guests. No matter what you wear, everyone will still see you as the help. That's just how life works for people like you. Ngozi said nothing. She simply nodded and continued her work, though her hands trembled slightly as she carried the tray into the dining room. Mrs. Adeyemi wasn't much better, though her cruelty came dressed in a different form. She rarely raised her voice. Instead, she spoke to Ngozi the way one might speak to furniture, present, useful, but never worth acknowledging. She never asked how Ngozi was doing. She never remembered her name correctly, often calling her girl or simply snapping her fingers when she needed something. One evening, during a dinner party with important guests, disaster struck. Ngozi, carrying a tray of delicate wine glasses, was startled when Adeyemi deliberately stepped backward into her path. The tray tipped, and 2 glasses shattered against the marble floor. The room fell silent. Every guest turned to look. Adeyemi's face twisted into mock horror before curling into a satisfied smirk. "I told you she was clumsy," Adeyemi announced loudly, loud enough for every guest to hear. "This is exactly why we shouldn't trust people like her with anything valuable. Mother, you really need to fire her before she breaks something that actually matters." Mrs. Adeyemi didn't even look at Ngozi directly. "Clean this up," she said flatly, waving a dismissive hand. "And be more careful next time, or you'll be paying for what you break out of your salary." Ngozi knelt down immediately, gathering broken glass with bare hands, ignoring the small cut forming on her finger. Around her, the dinner conversation resumed as if nothing had happened, as if she wasn't even in the room. That was perhaps the cruelest part of it all, not the insults, but the complete invisibility. To them, she wasn't a person capable of feeling pain. She was simply a function, a tool that occasionally malfunctioned. That night, alone in the small servants' quarters at the back of the house, Ngozi allowed herself to cry for the first time in months. Not because of the insults themselves, but because of what they represented. A family so consumed by wealth and status that they had forgotten how to see the humanity in people beneath them. She thought about calling her father about ending the assignment early, but something inside her resisted. She had come this far. She needed to see the full picture, not just the surface cruelty, but whether there was any redemption hiding somewhere in that house. Junior, the son, was the only member of the family who occasionally showed her basic decency. He would sometimes say thank you when she brought him food, or apologize quietly if his sister's behavior became too much to witness. But even his kindness was passive. He never once stood up to defend her, never challenged his mother or sister's cruelty out loud. His silence, in its own way, was its own kind of complicity. Weeks passed. The humiliations continued, each one slightly worse than the last. Ngozi began keeping a private journal, documenting everything, not out of bitterness, but because her father had asked for a full, honest account. Every insult, every act of casual cruelty, every moment of dismissiveness went into those pages, along with dates and details. Then came the incident that would change everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Mrs. Adeyemi hosted an important business lunch, one Ngozi immediately recognized as connected to the very merger her father was overseeing. She recognized some of the executives present, careful to keep her expression neutral as she served drinks and appetizers. Midway through the lunch, Adeyemi, apparently bored and looking for entertainment, decided to make Ngozi the center of attention in the worst possible way. "Everyone watch this," Adeyemi announced to the table, a cruel smile spreading across her face. She turned to Ngozi, who stood quietly near the wall waiting for further instructions. "Ngozi, dear, why don't you tell our guests what it's like being nobody? Go on, tell them how it feels knowing you'll clean floors your entire life, while people like us build empires." The table went quiet, several guests shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Ngozi felt her chest tighten, but she kept her composure, her eyes steady, her voice calm. "I don't think that's an appropriate question to ask in front of your guests, ma'am," she said quietly, respectfully, but firmly. Adeyemi's smile vanished instantly, replaced by fury. "Excuse me? Did the help just talk back to me?" Her voice rose sharply. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what my family is worth? You clean toilets for a living and you dare speak to me like that?" "Adeyemi, that's enough," Mrs. Adeyemi said, though her tone carried more concern for appearances than genuine defense of Ngozi. But Adeyemi wasn't finished. She stood up, marched over to where Ngozi stood, and in front of everyone, slapped the tray out of her hands, sending appetizers scattering across the polished floor. "Clean this up," Adeyemi hissed, "and remember your place before you speak again." The room fell into stunned silence. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others simply watched, unwilling to intervene. Ngozi knelt down slowly, gathering the mess without a single word, her hands steady despite everything inside her screaming to respond. What none of them noticed was one particular guest at the far end of the table, an older gentleman who had remained quiet throughout the entire lunch, watching everything unfold with careful, calculating eyes. He was Mr. Bassi, one of the senior partners representing the merger negotiations and a long-time, trusted friend of Chief Okonkwo. He said nothing during the incident, but that evening, he made a phone call that would set everything into motion. "Chief," he said when Ngozi's father picked up, "I think you need to see something before this deal goes any further." 2 days later, Chief Okonkwo requested an urgent, in-person meeting with Mrs. Adeyemi to finalize merger details, a meeting he insisted must take place at her home, with her full family present, including household staff. Mrs. Adeyemi, eager to please and secure the deal, agreed immediately, unaware of what was coming. On the morning of the meeting, the entire household buzzed with nervous energy. Adiz fussed over her appearance for hours, determined to make a good impression on the wealthy chief whose company would soon be intertwined with theirs. Junior remained unusually quiet, sensing something in the air he couldn't quite name. Ngozi continued her duties as normal, preparing refreshments, arranging the meeting room, saying nothing about what was coming. Only she knew what this day truly meant. When Chief Okonkwo's convoy arrived, Mrs. Adeyemi rushed to greet him personally at the door, her smile wide and rehearsed. "Chief Okonkwo, what an honor. Please, come in, come in. Everything is prepared for our discussion." The chief walked in with quiet dignity, flanked by 2 associates and Mr. Bassi, who offered Ngozi a small, knowing nod as he passed her in the hallway, a gesture that went completely unnoticed by everyone else in the room. They settled into the main sitting room, documents spread across the table, ready for what Mrs. Adeyemi believed would be a straightforward signing ceremony. Adiz sat nearby, eager to be included, while Junior lingered awkwardly near the doorway. "Before we begin," Chief Okonkwo said calmly, his voice carrying quiet authority, "I'd like to bring someone into the room. Someone who has spent the last 6 months here, learning things about this household that I believe are relevant to whether our companies should move forward together." "Mrs." Adeyemi's smile faltered slightly, though she tried to maintain her composure. "Of course, Chief. Whatever you need." The chief turned toward the doorway. "Ngozi, please come in." The room went still. Ngozi walked in slowly, still wearing her maid's uniform, her posture calm and unshaken. Adiz's confused expression slowly shifted into something closer to dawning horror. "Wait," Adiz stammered, looking between Ngozi and the chief. "Why is she—" "Ngozi is my daughter," Chief Okonkwo said simply, his voice steady, carrying the weight of absolute truth. The room fell into complete silence. Mrs. Adeyemi's face drained of color. Adiz's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Junior, standing near the door, felt his stomach drop. "For 6 months," the chief continued, "she has lived in this house, worked in this house, and been treated by your family in ways I find deeply troubling. I sent her here not to deceive you cruelly, but to understand the true character of the people I was about to entrust with a significant portion of my life's work. Character, as I've always taught her, reveals itself most clearly in how people treat those they believe hold no power over them." Mrs. Adeyemi's hands trembled as she reached for words that wouldn't come. "Chief, we didn't know. If we had known, that's precisely the problem." Chief Okonkwo interrupted, his tone firm but not unkind. "If you had known, you would have behaved differently. But you didn't know. And that is exactly why I needed to see how you truly treat people, not how you perform for people you believe matter." Adiz, still in shock, turned desperately toward Ngozi. I didn't mean any of it. It was just, we were just having fun. We didn't think." "Having fun," Ngozi repeated quietly, her voice calm but carrying an edge that silenced the room further. "Is that what you called it when you slapped a tray out of my hands in front of your guests? Is that what you called it every time you reminded me of my place, as if kindness were a currency too expensive for people like me?" Adiz had no response. Her face had gone pale, her earlier arrogance completely evaporated. Mrs. Adeyemi, sensing the deal slipping away, attempted damage control. "Chief, please, I assure you, we can make this right. Whatever needs to happen, This isn't about punishment," Chief Okonkwo said, cutting through her panic. "This is about trust. I built my company on the belief that how we treat the powerless reflects who we truly are, not how we treat those who can benefit us. 6 months of documented behavior tells me everything I need to know about this household's values." He turned to Mr. Bassi, who quietly opened a folder containing pages of documented observations. Ngozi's careful, honest journal entries, dates, incidents, all recorded without exaggeration or bitterness. "I won't be proceeding with this merger," the chief said finally, his voice calm but final. "Not because your business isn't capable. I have no doubt it is. But because I cannot, in good conscience, tie my family's legacy to a household that treats human dignity so carelessly. Mrs. Adeyemi's composure finally cracked. Chief, please, this deal means everything to us. We've invested years into this partnership. I'm begging you to reconsider. Perhaps, Chief Okonkwo said, standing slowly, you should have thought of that before allowing your daughter to humiliate someone in front of your most important guests. Wealth built on cruelty rarely lasts. I've seen it before, and I have no interest in watching it happen again under my name. He turned to Ngozi, his expression softening with quiet pride. You've done well, more than well. You showed patience when provoked. You showed dignity when disrespected. And most importantly, you never once used what you knew to seek revenge. You simply revealed the truth and let it speak for itself. Ngozi nodded, her eyes glistening but her voice steady. I didn't do this to hurt them, Papa. I did it because you taught me that the way we treat people who can't fight back tells us everything about who we really are. As father and daughter turned to leave, Mrs. Adeyemi called out one final time, her voice cracking with desperation. Please, Chief, isn't there anything we can do? Chief Okonkwo paused at the doorway, glancing back one last time. Learn, he said simply. Not for my benefit, but for the sake of every person who works in this house after today. Real change doesn't come from losing a business deal. It comes from understanding, truly understanding, why you lost it. With that, he and Ngozi walked out together, leaving behind a household stunned into silence, the weight of months of cruelty finally catching up with consequences no amount of wealth could undo. News of the failed merger spread quickly through business circles, along with quiet whispers about what had truly happened inside that house. Adeyemi, once known for her sharp tongue and social confidence, found herself isolated as friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the scandal. Mrs. Adeyemi's reputation, carefully built over decades, suffered a blow from which it would take years to recover. Junior, perhaps the only member of the family to genuinely reflect on what had happened, eventually sought Ngozi out weeks later, offering a quiet, sincere apology, not for forgiveness, but simply to acknowledge what he had failed to do when it mattered most. Ngozi accepted his apology graciously, though she reminded him gently that awareness without action had its own cost. As for Ngozi, she returned to her true life, working alongside her father, eventually taking on greater responsibilities within the family business. But she never forgot the lessons of those 6 months, the ache of being invisible, the sting of casual cruelty, the quiet strength required to endure it with dignity intact. Years later, when she rose to lead major decisions within her father's growing empire, she carried one guiding principle above all else: that true character is revealed not in boardrooms or grand gestures, but in how we treat the people who serve us quietly, expecting nothing in return. And so, this story reminds us of something timeless. Never judge a person by the uniform they wear or the job they perform, because you rarely know the full story behind someone's circumstances. Treat every person with respect, not because they can benefit you, but because it reveals who you truly are. Power that depends on humiliating others is never real power at all. And no matter how comfortable or untouchable you believe yourself to be, character always finds a way to reveal itself, often when you least expect it, and to the very people you overlooked.